Hi, I'm Bob, and welcome to Between the Sheets, where we look at Microsoft Excel and related technologies. Excel has a lot of great tools for data visualization, and I think the coolest one is the ability to plot data on a 3D map. Since the 2016 version, this has been a built-in feature, though you might have to go into Excel's preferences to enable it first. I'll show you how to do that. The general idea is that you can take data that has geographic information, like states, provinces, cities, counties, streets, zip codes, and postal codes, and plot the data on a globe. If that sounds like 3D Maps handles international locations, that's exactly right. Like pivot tables, 3D Maps have a data panel where you can include and exclude data, filter, and apply some formats. You can also save multiple sets of display options. If your data set has date or time information, you can present data on a timeline and watch it grow or shrink. Finally, once again, there's an issue of Windows versus Mac. Both platforms have a 2D mapping feature that you'll find on the ribbon bar along with all of the charting, but 3D maps are only in the Windows version, at least as of this recording. So let's take a look, see how it works. If you want some sample data to play around with, Microsoft supplies some databases you can download for free. You see they have this page getting started with 3D maps. Some really great information here. And I'll scroll down to the bottom, or towards the bottom, and you see they've got some sample databases. You notice this web address is going to be rather difficult to type in, so I shortened it for you, and you can use this shortened address you have on the screen. Okay, let's go into Excel. And let's take a look at this data set I'm using. This is my own, it's not Microsoft's. And you see we have information on company name, address, city, and all of that. And we also have dates and sale amounts. And we can play around with all of these. And you notice that I have this data in a table. Tables are great, and I love using tables, but they aren't necessary for creating a map. The other thing is, you might know that one of the great things about tables is that you can sort and filter, but applying a filter or a sort on this table has absolutely no effect on the map, and I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to go here to the button for state, and I'm going to deselect all, and let's say, for example, I just want to see California, so I'm going to choose California, click OK, and now we have just California. You'll see in a moment what I'm talking about. So let's say we want to go and insert the map now. So let's go and insert the map. I'm going to go to the Insert tab, and this is what I was talking about a moment ago, that in the Charts section, we have this thing for maps. Don't get that confused. This is 2D maps. In the Windows version only, you have this 3D map. Now, when I click it, it's going to go right into the mapping, and that's because I already have it enabled, but you might not. Now, one of two things will happen on your machine if you haven't run this yet. When you go in here and you go to 3D Map and choose Open 3D Maps, it might say to you, okay, the add-in hasn't been enabled yet, do you want to do it? And just say yes, and it goes right in. That might not happen. You might have to enable it manually. I want to show you how to do that, just in case. So I'm going to go to the File tab, and down at the bottom, I'm going to choose Options. And in the left navigation bar, I'm going to choose Add-ins. And on mine, because I already have it enabled, you see it says Active Application Add-ins. There's Microsoft Power Map. Now, on yours, if you have that, you're good to go. But if you don't, if yours is maybe listed down here, or it's not listed at all, what you need to do is see down on the bottom where it says Manage Excel Add-ins. You want to click that drop-down and choose COM Add-ins. COM is the component object model. You don't have to really worry about that. Click Go. And there it shows add-ins available, and you want to make sure to enable Microsoft Power Map. Also notice Power Pivot is there. That's another tutorial for another day, but I'm going to leave that. And then you would click OK. I'm just going to cancel out. So at this point, you should be ready to use it. So now I will go to 3D Map, And you notice that I don't have any tours listed here. Once I go and I use the mapping feature and I've got something in there, then when I come back, and I'll show this to you later, when I come back, I can either create a new one or I could go into an existing one. So I click the down arrow, choose Open 3D Maps, and that brings me into Power Map. And you can see there is one tour. You always have to have one tour when you're using this. We've got this field list. And the first thing I want to call your attention to is you see here's all the data all across the US. Remember in the underlying data set, I filtered out to see only California, but this is clearly everything, or it's clearly a lot more than California. So that's what I was talking about. If you know how to use pivot tables, and if you're not, watch my episode on pivot tables, these panels on the right are going to look somewhat familiar. You see we have a field list, we'll come back to this, and you see on the right we've got all kinds of formatting and filtering and so on information. And the first thing is it asks us location. And that means how are we deciding what we are looking at on the map? What is determining the location? So right now it's showing me address. Let me show you a few things. If I choose state, you notice that each state gets one dot, right? Because that's all we're looking at. I could look at county, and it's looking, well, obviously at counties. I could do it by zip code. What I want to do for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to go to the city level. And to make things a little more manageable, I want to look at data only for New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. So there's two ways I could do this. I'm going to open up the down arrow for filters. And now I could take state, and I could drag state into the filter that way. I'm just going to let go. Or I could click this plus sign and add filter. Either way, doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to go down here and choose state. And this is sort of like the list that we saw in the underlying data. Here's a list of all the states in this data set. So I'm going to scroll down. New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and then close that up again. Let me close this field list for a moment. And now you notice we have all the data there in those three states. This is kind of hard to see because we're zoomed out so much. So there's a couple ways you could zoom in. You could use your mouse or touchpad, whatever pointing device. But you notice it's very hard to do. For me anyway, I just find it very hard to use this. But fortunately we have these plus and minus signs buttons there. So I could just hit that plus, and then dragging is not that hard. So I could drag this over so I can see what I'm doing, zoom in and out as I need. And the whole purpose of this being a 3D map is that we get perspective. That's what these four buttons are. So I can use these buttons to rotate one way, rotate the other way, and that way I can get a nice look at it. And then I could just use the touchpad to zoom around to navigate around. If these buttons are in your way, down in the lower right corner, this button, you notice the rollovers is shown hide navigation buttons. So we can turn those on or off. I'll leave them on for the time being. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make these dots right there. There's no size there. I want these dots to reflect the sale amount. So they become kind of like bars on a bar chart. And the greater the sale amount, the taller the bar will be. Now I removed the field list. So up on the ribbon bar, I'm going to click field list to bring that back. And you see we have an option for height. So I can take sale. Now I could hit that plus to add field, kind of like what we did before, or I could take sale from the field list, drag it in. It could be a little hard to get the exact spot. There we go. So now I've got sale as a height indicator. Now it creates this legend. This legend is in my way. That's the only thing that's going to be there. So I'm just going to make sure it's selected and delete. I could always get that back. And again, I'm going to hide this field list for the time being. So now we can see that different sale amounts give us different bar heights. And no big surprise, you can see New York City and Philadelphia have the tallest bars. By the way, if I want that legend to come back at any time, I could just go up here and turn the legend on. Notice, this is kind of weird. I can't click legend to remove it. Notice it's grayed out. I actually have to click the legend and then delete it. Maybe that's going to be fixed in a future version. Let's apply some formatting. Down on the bottom of this task pane, you see it says layer options. So I'm going to click this little arrow and open it up. And you see we can choose how high in general they are. Notice I can drag and make them all. They'll all be taller or all be shorter. Thickness also, I can make them thicker or thinner. That kind of depends how clustered together they are. Opacity, right now they're 100% opaque, but maybe I want to be able to see through them a little bit, so I want them a little less opaque, a little more transparent. So I can do that. Now, I find this dark blue color is kind of hard to see, so I'm going to click that. I'm going to choose a different color. Maybe I'll choose a light blue or a medium blue. Here's the other nice thing is, what if I want to get the exact information for any of these? So let's say I'll go to this one here in Philly and I roll the mouse over that bar and I get this data card. That could be with any of them. Let's say New York State or whichever one, Caldwell, New Jersey, and so on. I can customize that data card. Let's go to the bottom of the pane on the right, and you see on the bottom it says Customize Data Card. So I'm going to click that. So this shows what's going to go in there. I want to add a field to that data card. Hit that plus sign. Now we have county information, so I can just choose county, and now county gets popped in there. If I ever want to go back to the defaults, I have that button there, but I'm going to click OK. And now when I roll over any of these, you notice this shows me the county as well as the other info that was already on that data card. It's also a good idea to put in map labels. I live in this area, so I know what's New Jersey and Philadelphia and all that, but of course I can't assume that everybody does. So over on the ribbon bar, I'm going to enable map labels, so now I can see exactly what's what. Now remember in the source data we saw there were dates. So let me go up here and close up the layer options again. And you see we have this filter here for time. So again, I could go into the field list, or I could simply go here to add field, whichever I like. And you see there is date. So I'm just going to choose that. So I don't even have to drag it in from the field list. I'll just close that up again. Now, as soon as I do that, you notice a couple of things happen. We have this date and time up there, and now we have these player controls down on bottom. This will let us see the data evolve over time. So I'm just going to click back there at the beginning of the time there, hit the play button, and notice we can see all of the data sprouting up, and of course we can see the date and the time counting. Now if you decide you want to hide one of these, see up on the ribbon bar, we've got the date and time and timeline, so I can hide that date and time. If I want to hide that timeline down there, I can choose that. I'm going to turn that back on because I think this is cool, and I'm going to show you something else with it in a little bit. Now I can take this map, what we see here, and export it as a still image or a video. So I'll go over here on the ribbon bar and choose Capture Screen. So that captures it to the clipboard, and now I can go and paste it. So I'm going to go into a Microsoft Word document, and now I can paste. And we get that as an image. Pretty cool. So I can select it and do everything that I would do with any other image. Now let's export that animated timeline as a video. Next to Capture Screen, I'm going to click Create Video. And this gives me some choices of what size and quality do I want. I'm going to choose the middle one, Computers and Tablets. Click Create. And I'm going to put it into this folder. Notice it gets saved as an MP4. Might take a few minutes to go and create it, but through the magic of video editing, we're going to speed this up a little bit. I click close when it's done. Now let's go and take a look. So there's that file. I'll just double click it. And there it is. It goes and it plays. So I could take this video and use it like I would use any old video in any presentation. Now let me close this, and we can set a few options for this video. So when I click on Scene Options, so you have all kinds of things that I could do, is like how long will it take that video to play, the scene name, any effects, the start and end date from the data, and the speed and all that. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to give this a scene name. So I'm going to call this and close it, and there we have that name. So this is a scene in the tour, and we get multiple scenes by creating them. So I'm going to go up there and choose New Scene. Now, I could go back to the world map, I could create a custom one. The easiest thing, I think, is to make a copy of this existing one and then just modify those parts that we need to modify. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to choose Copy. So this one is selected. And just kind of going down the map of the East Coast, what I want to do is I want to get Delaware, Maryland, Virginia. So let me rename it first. I'll go up there to Scene Options. There we go. So that's going to be Delaware, Maryland, Virginia. But of course, this is still showing the original 3 states. So now I can go and change those. So back down here for state, open that up. And say, all right, let's get rid of these 3. So now it's showing all of them. So there's Delaware, Maryland, Virginia. Close that up. And you see we're still doing this by city, but you might wonder, well, where the heck's all the data? Well, we still need to move that map around, and I might need to zoom in or zoom out. And I don't want these to be the same blue as those original 3 states, so now I can come back down here to Layer Options. Maybe I'll make that a more transparent yellow. So I can play around with this however I want. Now, as far as moving this map around, we were looking at these 3 buttons earlier, and I showed you that this button on the lower right corner will turn those navigation buttons on and off. But let's say if I want to zoom to the default map view, that's this first button. So there we are zoomed way out. Let me zoom in a little bit. As I said, this is difficult, but here's a nice little trick. I'm just going to click any one of those, and then this middle button is zoom to selection. So that zooms right in on what I selected. And now I can simply zoom out, get the perspective that I want. So if you have a lot of data and you're having trouble zooming in or finding exactly what you want, you can do it that way. Now remember before when we created the video, we had just these 3 states? Let's create a video again. So there's the original one, those 3 states. I'll call this Sales in 6 States. Save it. And now when we play that, let's double click it. And you notice this is going to play the first scene, followed by the second scene. So you can have as many scenes as you want down that tour. Now, similar to creating scenes, we can stack multiple layers in one scene. And that's what this is here on top of that task pane, add layer. So if I do that, notice this brings us, way back out into outer space. Come back in, and you notice there's all the data from the entire data set that we have, and we could do that as its own layer. So you notice, let me just close this up for a moment. So that is now layer 2. So layer 1 is what we were playing around with. I'll click this eyeball to hide it. So this is all of the data in the data set. I'll display it, and now I'm going to hide that layer 2. So now we see just the data that we were playing around with in that scene or in the second scene. This might fight you a little bit. You notice this layer 1, there's only a layer 1 in that second scene. In the first scene is where we have those 2 layers. And again, turn them on and turn them off. If I decide that I really don't need a layer after all, this layer 2 is just temporary here, I can go and hit that X. It's deleted. It gives you a warning. You can't undo that. And now we're back to where we were. One last thing. The map is saved as part of the Excel file. That means there's no such thing as saving this map separately. I can close it without saving, and then when I'm back in Excel, I can reopen it and pick up where I left off. And that's what I was describing initially when we came in. So I'm going to close the 3D maps, and notice it didn't ask me to save. It puts us back in Excel. And it's got this little helpful thing there. If I want to tour, it's just in my way. I'm going to delete that. And now we could do everything that we would normally do in this Excel sheet. Right, we're still on the Insert tab of the ribbon bar. If I want to get back in there, in the Tours section, go to 3D Map, open 3D Maps, and there's the tour that we were just playing around with. And I could click it, and we're right back to where we were. Resets a few things like the field list and some of the perspective and all that. What if I don't want this tour? What if I want to create a brand new one from scratch? Let me close this, go back into 3D Map, open there, and instead of clicking on that tour, I'm going to go down here and choose a new tour. And now we start all over again like we did in the beginning. So you could have as many tours as you want in this one Excel workbook and then switch between one and the other. 3D Maps is a great data visualization feature. Most Excel users don't even know it's there. If you're a map nerd like me, you'll have a lot of fun playing around with it, and I think you'll see it's pretty useful. So until next time, my name is Bob, and this has been Between the Sheets.